Well, I've always liked the monster within idea. I like the zombies being us. It's like zombies are the blue-collar monsters.
A frigid, barren landscape awaits the player in the latest installment of Call of Duty Zombies. Blizzard winds disguise the surroundings, creating an ominous presence and a strong sense of uncertainty. Suddenly, the water sparks and a giant electric man exits. And yeah, categorically, we should be covering this guy under the unique features. But how the am I supposed to dance around this feature when explaining the map's layout and atmosphere? So we're gonna cheat a little bit here. This is George Romero. Yes, that George Romero, the guy who created the modern concept for zombies as a whole in 1968 with his film Night of the Living Dead. In this installment, however, George is far less cool. This giant beefed lightning zombie has 250,000 health per player. Yeah, 250,000 health per player. So 1 million health on 4 player. For reference, one of the best guns in the game, the Galil, does about 200 damage per shot, pack-a-punched. Needless to say, during most of the player's experience on Call of the Dead, George Romero will be hunting down the player. He actively moves at this slow speed, taking the quickest path toward the player's active location. This includes hopping over barriers and such that the player is unable to. If shot, George gets absolute roid rage and chases after the player, swinging his light like an axe. The only way to calm George down is to get him into the ice water. Once in the ice water, he will begin walking again until provoked once more. So yeah, a huge part of opening this map is making sure you're one step ahead of George at all times, and you have an active contingency plan of where to go next to avoid being cornered by this giant monster. But now, back to the map's layout. The spawn room of Call of the Dead has the standard Olympia and M14 and quick revive as well, all the way across the water. The player can make use of hopping to access this machine and avoid getting frozen. If zombies or the player stay in the ice water for too long, they will freeze. The zombies will be shatterable at this point, similar to a Winter's Howl shot, while the player either needs to get shot or hit to free themselves. The spawn room only has one window, being right here. Most of the zombies escape to attack the player from the ground or the waters. There are 2 paths for the player to take, towards the boat or towards the lighthouse. We'll be covering the boat path first. Purchasing this debris will lead the player onto the boat where the friendly MPL rests on the wall. I usually purchase this weapon here, similar to 5, given I need to open doors fast, and typically on Call of the Dead, I don't hit the box for quite a while. The first level here is pretty compact and tight, which will be a common theme for Call of the Dead. Purchasing the debris on this staircase will lead the player up to the top of the ship, where another door rests. Inside this door is the power switch. This is easily the least the player has to explore our map to access the power switch so far, and we've basically only opened one area, then gone up 2 floors from there. Typically on a game of Call of the Dead, the next goal has to be going for Juggernog. In Jug's Call of the Dead location, one of the most inconvenient, long-winded, and annoying locations of Jug in all of zombies. In order to start the path to Jug, the player will now need to purchase the debris to access the middle section of the boat. This door gives the player access to the top and bottom floor here, connected by the staircase. The MP40 sits friendly on this wall for 1,000 points, a decent purchase when the MPL inevitably runs out of ammo. There's also a small section of water down these stairs here, important if the player accidentally shoots George. Something really mid about this part of the map, however, is that once you jump down here, there is no linear path back to the front of the ship. In order to go back, the player must jump down here, run back towards spawn, and basically do a whole loop. Call of the Dead has a few areas where it's rather complicated to get from point A to point B, which is an aspect of the map I can't stand. I'm not sure if they thought it was a good idea to make the map feel not interconnected, but it simply comes across as annoying and clunky. I'll address the other couple areas when they pop up in a bit, but my instant fix for this one would be simply having a large chunk of metal or debris connecting these areas like a bridge. Anyways, the player can open this door here to get to the rear of the ship, where a cluster of containers and other debris awaits them. This door really shouldn't be purchased here. Rather, the player should open this door below deck. This leads to another ice water area, one to certainly be weary of due to zombies spawning in here. but across this icy water is finally the Juggernog machine, which cost another 2,500. Yeah, points are important on this map more than most. The door above Jug leads to the rear of the ship area and may be necessary for a quick escape, as working around George here can be pretty difficult depending on how far behind he is. This Jug location almost feels like a trap, as it basically rests in a desolate corner in the most abandoned section of the map. After getting Jug, the player will likely not return to this section of the map unless they need to purchase Jug again. After escaping the depths of the ship, the two options to proceed opening the map are to grab this debris here or to journey back to spawn and open the other route, leaving that area, which is what we will be doing. Opening this door here leads the player to an interesting icy cave where zombies can break from the ceiling to hinder the player from advancing. The MP5K sits here as a wall buy after exiting the cave, and after passing this weapon, the player can get up to Call of the Dead's iconic landmark, the Lighthouse. This area is decent for early round training and holding put if no other option is available, but this place can get tricky fast. 2 floors below this area are even more tightly compact and shouldn't be ventured in unless the player is going to PhD or progressing through the map. The player can access the interior of the lighthouse by purchasing either this door here or this door here. The lighthouse interior is pretty much what you'd expect. Multiple levels of a circular metal connected by a winding staircase down the middle. Debris lies in the player's way going up or down the lighthouse. Atop the lighthouse, the player can go outside and access a few new features to Call of the Dead that we'll discuss later. Hopping down here though with PhD is super satisfying. Which brings us to our next area, the front of the lighthouse. This area is pretty open, has an AK-74U on the wall, and has a water location for George to cool down in. This is another area, however, that has a layout issue. I've always thought it was really dumb that there wasn't debris here connecting this area to the spawn room. George can hop over this fence to get between the two sections of the map, but it is inaccessible for the player. I always thought it would be a better idea to make this debris purchasable from this side only, and make it like 2,500 points, since it isn't a required door, but a cool convenient door, and the player can decide if it's worth the expensive purchase price. Anyways, the only area to address now is the back of the lighthouse. If the player goes out the back of the lighthouse and continues straight, they'll go down through more icy water into what's known as the boathouse. In here is the stamina machine, and that's pretty much it. Not too many reasons to wander back to this section of the map. Taking a right here, however, leads the player to... Yeah, I like the slide, especially when I can get George to go down it. Down here is speed cola and lots of ice water. Jumping over this cliff here will return the player back to the front of the lighthouse. As you can see, Call of the Dead is basically a map split in two halves, the ship side and the lighthouse side. These two sides are connected by purchasing this door we eyed earlier. This little shortcut is used often to get between areas of the map and makes up for some of the many issues I have with the map's layout, but certainly not all of them. Overall, Call of the Dead's atmosphere is difficult to put into words. I love the ominous presence of this map. It truly utilizes the location, weather, and George to create a horrific environment. Where Call of the Dead falls off, however, is with its excess use of fog. This map is ugly, to put it simply. We discussed fog way back during Nocturne Totem, and how the fog worked well because it didn't roll into the playable area and didn't hinder the player's vision or experience. Call of the Dead does not care about the player's vision and makes it hard for players to see truly what the map is all about. Flipping the power switch definitely helps, and I don't necessarily think the fog here is as bad as some players make it out to be, but it's certainly a flaw. Between the layout issues, George Romero, early power switch, and frozen biome, Call of Duty is certainly the most unique map we've gotten thus far in the series. Now it's time to check in on a few things that introduced to the franchise. Avid viewers of this series may have noticed I didn't cover the Pack-a-Punch quest per usual during my coverage of the map's layout. That's because, well, there is none. Flipping on the power switch activates the lighthouse, and wherever the lighthouse points is where the Pack-a-Punch machine will spawn. I hate that there's no quest for Pack-a-Punch on this map, as you know I love a fair challenge to accessing the machine. This is made up for in a huge way by the Juggernog machine, as going for Jug feels like a quest in and of itself, but definitely an area where Call of the Dead is lacking. Anyways, the reason Pack-a-Punch is relevant now is because Call of the Dead is the first map to introduce a moving Pack-a-Punch mechanic. When lightning strikes, the lighthouse will shine brightly on the waters, either in spawn, at the back of the ship, or behind the lighthouse. When this occurs, the Pack-a-Punch machine will rise from the depths of the waters. The player now has a limited time to upgrade their weapon before lightning strikes again and the machine departs. The Lighthouse will now move around frantically for a few minutes before settling on another place to reveal the Pack-a-Punch machine. I'm not entirely sure if the Pack-a-Punch can move and take your weapon with it if you have bad timing, but I know it can happen on other maps. Let me know in the comments if this has ever happened to you on Call of the Dead. All 3 pack locations are all in the frozen water, so it's clearly best to do this near the end of the round and quickly to avoid freezing. A new perk appears on Call of the Dead, being Deadshot Daiquiri. Deadshot is our first perk that really isn't beloved by anyone in the community. What it does is when you aim down your sights, it auto-locks to the zombie's head, which can simply be done by having better aim, right? It also reduces hip fire spread and recoil, which is nice, but not really worth a perk slot. As a matter of fact, on PC, it doesn't even auto-lock on the zombie's head, so they cut the price from $1,500 to $1,000 on PC. I've never really met anyone that regularly uses Deadshot, and it's certainly the first in a line of useless perks we'll come to see. So far, every perk has had its uses, whether it be in every game like Jug and Stamina, or dependent on strategy like PhD or Double Tap. Deadshot really has no place in this conversation, but not to worry, as it will soon be joined by more useless perks. The last feature introduction will be the zip lines, because no shot we're counting that shit on Xenonuma. There are a few zip lines scattered around Call of the Dead that help interconnect this poorly structured map. I'd say the only positive to this layout lacking map is the creative ways you can learn to get from one area to another. The zip lines are fun to use and will make sporadic appearances throughout Zombies, but really pick up as a mode of transportation towards the latter half of the franchise. Although jumping right into fighting George is tempting, it's definitely important to cover some unique features this map has first. Let's start with a couple weapons that make their return from Ascension, being the sickle and the Matryoshka dolls, which actually will be these weapons' final appearance for, well, ever, basically.
A sickle is a perfect weapon.
Oh, there's a doll inside a doll inside a doll!
Weapon made for a commie, and at least it's sharp. 1 becomes 2, becomes 3, becomes 10.
This map actually introduces 2 new wonder weapons, being the VR-11 and the Scavenger. Surely, we're in for a treat. One of those 2 weapons is bound to be fantastic, right? We'll start with the VR-11, a weapon great in theory, yet poor in execution. This weapon doesn't have much ammo, yet excels in concept by turning zombies into humans that distract the other zombies. This is really cool, yet only affects 1 zombie at a time, which for a wonder weapon, garbage. It has a couple more useful features once pack-punched, notably calming George down after being shot, and briefly giving other players insta-kill if they're shot with it. This is certainly the most useful feature of the VR-11, yet isn't really worth a full weapon slot in my opinion. The other wonder weapon is an explosive sniper called the Scavenger. The Scavenger is a satisfying, fun wonder weapon to use, with some important and unfortunate caveats. Firstly, the player obviously needs to utilize PhD Flopper to give the Scavenger its fullest potential. Secondly, it does become a 2-shot after round 40, which is a pretty high dang round for a casual game of zombies, and basically the point where I'd personally quit, growing bored of the game, but this does make it controversial among high round players. Lastly, and most importantly, this thing is hard to use without making George mad. The range of the Scavenger's explosion is, dare I say, huge. It's frustrating after countless occasions shooting hordes of zombies and accidentally setting off George, causing you to have to run back and forth to the water. So yeah, the Scavenger is actually pretty darn good for an explosive sniper wonder weapon, but a few unfortunate details do make this gun rather lackluster. We've already covered the basics of George Romero, but now it's time to get in depth and figure out exactly how to deal with this giant douche. Firstly, it's important to be careful of the electric zombies George can create. These guys are just a little more dangerous than your average zombie. Killing George is not easy, but it is possible with the right weapons. The death machine drop is huge for taking George down. If the player sees a death machine and is in a place where they feel somewhat safe, they can just lay into George. The best way to do this is to know where the nearest body of water is and lead him to it while shooting. Once George is in the water, feel free to continue lighting him up. You'll know George is below half health if his light starts sparking like this. The most useful weapons used to kill George are the ray gun, the Scavenger, and most certainly the Juggernog. When pack-a-punching this weapon into the D11 disassembler, the player is only a mere 25 headshots away from killing George on solo, making this easily the best way to do it, with the Scavenger at second place. The ray gun will take a lot of fire, but definitely will help diminish his health. A few death machines and a ray gun, and he's toast. Upon being killed, George will drop a perk bottle and a death machine. And he'll come back to life like a round later. Which, you know, sucks. It's possible to get all perks on Call of the Dead using this method because similar to Ascension's monkey rounds, George's perk bottles bypass the purchase limit. A couple features we've already addressed are the slide and the ice water freezing. We also addressed the zip lines in the last category, as they will continue to appear in the franchise. However, the flinger will not, so let's discuss that now. The flinger appears here on the boat on Call of the Dead, and will fling the player from the boat all the way to the lighthouse. A great way to traverse across the map if it's needed quickly. It's also able to kill zombies and fling George across the map, which is fun to watch. There are a bountiful amount of achievements and trophies on this map, but the only one we'll be talking about for now is shooting on location, which involves killing 10 zombies with one scavenger shot 100 feet away. The most common way to get this is to have a friend train zombies at the bottom of the lighthouse, and they go to the back of the ship and fire from heat. As long as you get the scavenger at a decent round, this shouldn't be difficult using this strategy. There are a couple other unique things on Call of the Dead, but they're tied to the Easter egg and will be addressed once we go over this map's main quest. For now though, we move on to high round strategies on Call of the Dead, and how for the longest time, this was indisputably the hardest high round ever. Open areas are hard to come by on Call of the Dead, so training is a bit difficult on this map, and meanwhile, George completely decentralizes camping, making it virtually impossible to camp on this map. The most common training location on this map, and really the only logistical solo spot, is in front of the lighthouse. It's smart to keep the bottom door of the lighthouse here closed, and open the door here to the side to access the upper parts of the lighthouse. On co-op, sometimes one player will camp with the VR-11 in the corner, and repeatedly give the other player insta-kill to take care of the zombies. The spawn room is a doable training location, but definitely not super convenient. If you're on co-op and don't want to utilize the VR-11 strategy, I'd recommend one player come here while the other player trains by the lighthouse. There's a glitch spot right here after the slide that can be accessed using a knife lunge. Unlike 5's table glitch, this remains unpatched to this day, so the player can utilize this, but it's cheap and doesn't really count, of course. Call of the Dead has been known across the board as one of the hardest zombies maps in history. As a matter of fact, if I was making this video 1 year ago, I'd be telling you right now that nobody has ever hit round 100 on this map. But that's exactly what Prompt did on August 6, 2025, hitting round 105, finally reaching this elusive round. I'll leave a video in the description explaining how this was done in more detail, but it was basically done with barrier building manipulation and using the packed VR-11. I'm as surprised as you are, to not only kill the zombies before breaking through, but also for keeping George away as well. The reason round 100 was so elusive for so long is because Call of the Dead has no traps on it, and no infinite damage weapon. Every map from Varrock through Ascension had traps, and Noct had the flamethrower, while Call of the Dead really has nothing to kill the zombies after a certain round. It was crazy when the news broke that this feat had been conquered, and to this day, no one else has ever reached round 100. It's crazy that we made it this far into the video and haven't discussed the amazing cast of characters featured on this map. 4 iconic actors are playable characters on this map, being Danny Trejo, who played Machete from the Machete movie series, Robert Englund, who played Freddy Krueger in A Nightmare on Elm Street, Michael Rooker, who played Merle Dixon on The Walking Dead, and Sarah Michelle Gellar, who played Buffy the Vampire Slayer in that TV series. This crew of characters is really cool to play as, especially Michael Rooker, who actually fights off zombies on the big screen in The Walking Dead.
You ought to be more polite to a man with a gun. Only common sense.
And not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Matthew 5:29 and 30.
I ain't gonna beg. I ain't begging you.
Similar to 5, this is really the only factor of Call of the Dead that's good without controversy. Let's jump right into the mix with George, a controversial feature if there ever was one. George certainly changes the entire complexity of this experience, which benefits and takes away from the map in numerous ways. George is the first of many features in zombies that encourage the player to abandon camping and begin training. On one side, I feel like having George adds replayability to the map, as some games the player can load on simply with the goal to kill this guy, rather than high rounding or doing the Easter egg. On the other side, he obviously complicates this map to a breaking point for some players and makes the scavenger so much less fun to use. George can really get on your nerves and be the last straw in an already frustrating game. There's times I don't mind this guy, and there's times I absolutely can't stand this guy. I definitely don't believe he provides the same spark to this map that the Pentagon Thief, for example, provides to 5. On top of that, let's continue with the negatives here for a bit. The fog is so frustrating at times on Call of the Dead. I'm not going to go too much into it, as I kinda already did earlier, but damn did they overdo the fog in a way that takes away from the map, rather than aesthetically improving it. And the layout, there's really no reason for these paths not to be interconnected. It just adds annoyance to the player, and that's truly what a lot of the troublesome features are on Call of the Dead. Annoyance. That being said, there's still just something about this map that I really enjoy. Really, it's inexplicable. Perhaps how it's so unique, I don't know. I can go into great detail picking apart this map's flaws, but at the end of the day, Call of the Dead is a unique experience, a hard experience. At times, the blistering winds and snow of this map is welcoming for an intense game of zombie killing. Call of the Dead will always be a classic hardcore zombies experience, and in my opinion, will forever objectively be the hardest zombies map of all time. Now this story is freaking fun. On March 17th, 2011, George A. Romero, the creator of Zombies, has decided to shoot on location, pun intended, for his new Zombies film, recruiting Danny Trejo, Robert Englund, Michael Rooker, and Sarah Michelle Gellar as a zombie killing crew. Unfortunately for all involved, a real zombie outbreak occurs while filming. The first zombie takes and kills George Romero, zombifying him into the terrible being we are haunted by throughout the map. Luckily for the crew, however, all the guns they have on set are apparently real, and they start messing zombies up. Michael Rooker's double barrel doesn't even apply to the standard weapon rules. Maybe he already packed it or something. Anyways, while exploring this frozen wasteland and trying to stay away from the evil George Romero, this crew of characters comes across another familiar crew of characters, the Ultimus crew. But the Ultimus crew is unable to assist in any zombie killing in this experience, as they are trapped behind this metal door. Takio puking away as Richtofen and the rest of the crew give instructions to the actors to try to help them obtain something known as the Vril device and escape the frozen tundra. This task is where the Easter egg picks up. Call of the Dead's Easter egg is the first and only one for a while that is doable with any amount of players, even solo, although there are actually significantly less steps on solo. After turning on the power, the player must knife this door to speak to the crew for the first time. The first objective is to find a fuse on the floor above near PhD and stick it into this electric box. Now, they must destroy 4 generators with explosives. These grenade throws can be tricky, yet satisfying to hit. The player is in a lot of luck, however, if they end up rolling the crossbow or the scavenger, which also take out the generators and make this step far easier. The next 2 steps are exclusively on the co-op egg and are reasonably simple, consisting of acquiring Nikolai's vodka and interacting with various foghorns and radios in a certain order. The most noteworthy step here is definitely the valve step, a puzzle that consists of turning these 4 dials on the 4 floors of the lighthouse to create a code. The problem is, turning one dial turns the others. My recommended guide for this step is Codename Pizzas, where he tells you exactly how to do the step, and it's worked for me every single time. I think this type of puzzle is really cool and unique, but I definitely appreciate Codename Pizza helping us out with a guide here. At some point during the game, solo and co-op, the player must turn the ship wheel 2 turns to the right, pull this lever once, and pull this lever 3 times. This spawns in the submarine, whose light will now shine through the top of the lighthouse. And now we return to the best part of any Easter egg run, RNG, as the VR11 is required for this semi-final step, on both co-op and solo. And just to show off the beauty of RNG, here's a compilation of us trying to get this damn thing from the box.
You can't keep getting away with it! He's back!
So yeah, we hate RNG on this channel. Anyways, once the VR-11 is acquired, you must turn a zombie near the light, then knock him down with explosive weapons. Solo speedrunners literally down themselves to do this quickly, since downing yourself with quick revive gives you the Mustang salad. Killing this guy will give the player the Vril device, which is the whole reason the Ultimus crew came here. Giving the device to Richtofen allows Ultimus to teleport away, and the player to get a free Wonder Waff? Badass. What's more badass is after doing this Easter egg for the first time, the player will get a free Wonder Waff every time they kill George, rather than a free death machine. An achievement is also given to the player upon beating this egg on solo and co-op, so make sure to do both. Only a couple small side eggs make an appearance on this map, being this poster of Avenged Sevenfold near the Ultimus door, and the Easter egg song, which is by, surprise, Avenged Sevenfold. This can be activated by interacting with 3 rocks, one being here in Spawn, one here in the kitchen, and one here near PhD. This song starts a long, badass relationship between A7X and COD. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Call of the Dead is one of the only maps ever to have multiple step changes in its Easter egg depending on whether the game is solo or co-op, which begs the question as to why they won't give us another soloable Easter egg until the end of BO2. But I suppose beggars can't be choosers, and having the ability to do this egg on solo or with just one of your buddies definitely separates Call of the Dead from its competition on BO1. Call of the Dead was an original zombies map in all regards, not being based on a multiplayer map or campaign mission. It reappears only once, being Black Ops 4's Tagged or Toten. Tag is a far more complex map than Call of the Dead, providing more areas, side quests, and a much larger Easter egg quest. That being the case, we will obviously be discussing the intricacies of this map way further down the road. I would, however, like to bring light to the fact that this map came out after George Romero's passing, and his glasses here in the former PhD room will grant the player 500 points and a personalized quote per playable character upon interacting with them. A super classy move by Treyarch. Yeah, so this is going to confuse you guys as much as it confuses me, because like I said, I can pick apart the flaws of Call of the Dead for a while. Like, I can go into it, and the pros, I can't really go into them, but I think Call of the Dead is an A-tier map. I enjoy it. I know the guy after me is gonna say he's gonna take into consideration all the negatives I've said, but I just think Call of the Dead is such a unique experience. I don't know. It's fun. It's a fun, challenging map. And it's not challenging in a way that's like unfair, like future maps that we'll be discussing pretty soon. But like, I don't know. This is where objectives really start to open up. I like that you can do the Easter egg on solo. This is the first and only map for a while that you can do that, and you can do it on co-op. I like that it adds steps on 2-player. I like the fact that like killing George Romero is an objective that you can go into the game with and is a real challenge. And getting a dragon off is like, yes, on this map, other than any other map, you know? Obviously, like I said, there's so many glaring flaws. I'm not going to go into why it's not an S, because that's what you've been hearing throughout this whole video. But I suppose right now I'm just trying to justify putting it in A after saying so many negative things about it. Call of the Dead is just classic zombies. This is a personal preference thing. I guess what I could say is objectively, maybe I don't think it belongs in A tier, but this is all opinion based. Call of the Dead is a classic zombie map and one of my favorites from when I was a kid, and it remains to be so to this day.
Hey, what's up guys? It's Brent, or NC Honda Kid as y'all know me, and it's time to give my ranking for Call of the Dead. I'm going to get some pushback for this, but I guess the best way I can put it is Call of the Dead has never really struck the same with me as it has with other people, so I'm going to have to put it in the top of C tier. I guess the reasons for that would be the layout of the map. I never really have liked it. You spend half the game trying not to freeze in the water. George is always on you. You know, you can kill him, he'll go away for a round or two, but he's always going to be back. That's really annoying in my opinion. You know, George is I'm glad he's there, but I don't like him being in the map the way that he is. And also the VR-11, the map's wonder weapon, is pretty awful. It doesn't do the job it's supposed to do. It's cool, but it doesn't do a really good job at killing the zombies. The only thing that's keeping this map out of D tier, in my opinion, is the crew. The crew is very cool, one of the best of all time, in my opinion. Also, the location is really cool. You know, Siberia, you know, on a broken ship. But other than that, it's gonna have to go in C tier for me. But you know, I really appreciate the support from you guys. You know, we've really enjoyed doing this series so far, and I'll hand it back to Joe.
And that's a wrap on Call of the Dead. Thank you guys for watching. I feel like we're flying through these BO1 maps, which is fine by me, as I'm super excited for what we have in store as the series goes on. Shangri-La is next, another extremely challenging experience with its loyal followers and devoted haters. And with that, till next time.